An unnamed foreign ministry spokesman said the U.S. policies are little short of lighting the fuse of total war. The spokesman also blamed the U.S.-South Korea military drills for putting the whole peninsula on the brink of war. He said the root of increasing tensions is the hostile policies by the U.S. Have a listen to this.
이제 조선반도에서 전쟁이 터진다면
Once war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, no matter who started, the U.S. will have to be blamed. The U.S. is not satisfied with current hostile policies against us. They deployed a number of strategic weapons to the peninsula.
The South Korean Defense Ministry agreed on Thursday to install the THAAD anti-missile system as soon as possible in response to an increased tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Now, parts of the THAAD system were delivered to the deployment site in Seongju County on Wednesday, causing massive protests. Due to the worsening situation in the region, 100 members of the U.S. Senate were invited to the White House for an emergency security briefing.
Well, the THAAD issue has taken center stage at the 6th Moscow Conference on International Security. During a joint briefing involving both China and Russia, Major General Cai Jun of the People's Liberation Army said a THAAD deployment would inevitably deteriorate the international security environment. He said South Korea was seeking absolute unilateral military superiority through the installation. He added it was all a part of America's global anti-missile strategy, which aims to further blockade the Asia-Pacific, ultimately weakening the strategic capacity of China and Russia. However, in a bid to safeguard their security interests and maintain a regional strategic balance, both countries they would undertake further measures. And Russia called for THAAD deployment to be halted and to seek solution through dialogue instead.
Controversy has followed the anti-missile defense system from the start. The U.S. says it's to protect against DPRK threats. Many South Koreans aren't convinced. Protests against the deployment are growing stronger. As tensions continue to rise in Northeast Asia, Beijing is urging both Washington and Seoul to scrap the plan.
THAAD is damaging the strategic balance and security in the region, and China strongly opposes the deployment of THAAD. The Chinese military will continue to conduct specific exercises and training for real combat, and continue with operational tasks on new weapons and equipment.
THAAD is designed to intercept short and medium-range ballistic missiles during their final phase of flight. But its coverage, especially the monitoring scope of its X-band radar, goes far beyond its host country. Beijing has repeatedly expressed opposition to its deployment. And amid growing security uncertainties, China launches a new aircraft carrier. The Chinese and Russian militaries have issued a joint statement against U.S. global anti-ballistic missile systems.
The relationship between the Chinese and Russian militaries shows the high-level strategic trust and coordination between the two sides. Over the past 4 months, the two sides have held meetings on missile defense. That symbolizes the determination of the two countries to deal with the challenges.
Pyongyang regards the installation of THAAD next door as a provocation. While the U.S. and DPRK continue to exchange heated rhetoric over the scale of Pyongyang's nuclear program, China again called for restraint.
As Pyongyang vows to conduct another nuclear test anytime soon, it's difficult to dissuade Seoul from taking measures to boost defense. But the deployment of THAAD is adding new problems for South Korea and the region. Oh, this means China's efforts in pushing forward a nuclear-free peninsula and its role in cooling down the heat are facing their most challenge to date. Han Bin, CGTN, Beijing.
One pointed message after another from the U.S. and its two allies to Pyongyang. On Wednesday, the South Korean and U.S. militaries held a combined firing drill in Pocheon, about 60 kilometers northeast of Seoul. Pocheon is located near the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. Dozens of tanks, rocket launchers, and fighter jets were seen during the live-fire exercises. This was the third one this month, and it came only a day after the DPRK held one of its own. Meanwhile, South Korea also dispatched a frigate and submarine to join maritime training exercise in waters south of the Korean peninsula. It will also acquire 2 advanced early warning radars called Green Pine to detect ballistic missiles from the north later this year. Heading for the Korean peninsula, the U.S. aircraft carrier strike group Carl Vinson on Thursday was joined by Japan's Air Self-Defense Forces for a joint exercise in waters south of Japan. It follows 2-day exercises with 2 Japanese destroyers as the Vinson passed through the Philippine Sea. The U.S. Navy says the 2 exercises demonstrate the ability of the U.S. and Japan to respond quickly to threats in the region. Yang Zhao, CGTN.
Benjamin Hall is live in London. All right, Benjamin, any signs that either side is backing down here?
Morning, Shannon. None at the moment. Both sides still playing these games of brinkmanship, which the North Koreans have played so successfully for so long. But they might just be learning now that this time the U.S. not as willing to back down. As you were saying, the North Koreans have released this video of their live fire exercises, the largest ever, they say, held in their country. But some analysts have suggested they might be doctored, and the regime does have a history of photoshopping its drills and its parades. Soon after, the U.S. also released footage of its live-fire aerial exercises with the South Koreans, which took place over the weekend. These specific live-fire drills, just 15 miles from the North Korean border, usually take place every 5 years, but were moved forward. And of course, the USS Michigan submarine is there, armed with ballistic and Tomahawk missiles. The USS Carl Vinson strike group just days away, so a real build-up now of military hardware in the area. Shannon?
All right, Benjamin, so the U.S. is also deploying its anti-missile defense system in South Korea. How has that been received in the region?
Yeah, well, that's right, the THAAD anti-missile defense system, quite controversial down there. It was supposed to be operational later in the year, but they've sped that up, and they now say it will be operational just in a few days. It worked its way through the South Korean countryside down to a golf course in the south, where it's going to be located. Now, China strongly objects to the deployment of this system, and some analysts have said that it might make negotiations with them over North Korea more difficult. And on the same day as that system was deployed, China launched its first aircraft carrier built entirely on its own. It's a demonstration by them of the growing sophistication of its defense industries. The carrier, though, will not be fully operational till 2020. So many different countries flexing their muscles in the area, and of course countries that the U.S. has to work with over North Korea, not least China. Shannon?
All right, Benjamin Hall with the latest. Thank you.
This is a Fox News alert. We will never stop our nuclear test. That is the message coming from officials in the People's Republic of North Korea this morning. The rogue nation saying it will continue to develop its nuclear arsenal in the face of U.S. confrontation. So how should the Trump administration respond? Let's talk to Fox News military analyst, former Lieutenant Colonel Ollie North. Ollie, good morning to you.
Good to see you, Steve.
Pretty significant yesterday that the White House bust in all 100 senators. They were told that the threat is very grave and urgent as well. Is that what you're hearing?
Yes, in fact it is. And it's wise to have done everything that the Trump administration has done so far, because it's very clear that Kim Jong-un, the only fat man in Korea, is preparing to do another nuclear weapons test, which will be, by the way, their 6th since they agreed never to do it again.
Yeah.
So, look, it's one of the poorest countries on earth. Grass is a vegetable in North Korea. The dwarf in the Hermit Kingdom is preparing for this test, and he's the only fat man in the country.
Yeah.
And you think about, he's very paranoid. He's eliminated all of his possible opponents, at least as far as he's concerned. And this is a Democratic People's Republic Iran joint venture operation, Steve. What you got is nuclear weapons and ICBMs capable of delivering them being developed in a joint venture with Iranians. That's where the money's coming from.
And, Ollie, that is terrifying to us, but it's got to be terrifying to Kim Jong-un, the fact that all 100 senators went up to the White House yesterday, and the President of the United States is pretty good friends, he says, with the President of China.
Well, and that's a good sign. Look, the North Koreans not only have nuclear weapons and they're developing the means of delivering them, they also have a massive store of chemical and perhaps biological weapons. And so you got 10 million civilians in South Korea that are vulnerable right across the DMZ.
Ollie, the situation is dire. What does this president do?
This president needs to keep doing what he's doing, because the message is clear to the Chinese. He's reinforced our relationships with our allies in South Korea and Japan. He's deployed THAAD ballistic missile intercept batteries to both countries. The Carl Vinson is now in waters where it could strike targets in the People's Republic. What we need to do is hope that the Chinese, who are the only people with real leverage here, can convince Kim to stop, or because they know all the players, they can go and tell somebody to take charge and replace him. We're not going to send a SEAL team into Pyongyang to lift the guy out and put him in a box.
We need China. All right. Ali, thank you very much for your analysis. Expert, as always.
From an air base in California to demonstrate America's national nuclear capability. The timing of the launch has been criticized amid U.S. tensions with North Korea. The Nuclear Age Peace Foundation slammed the U.S. for operating with, quote, a clear double standard. The foundation, which has been advocating against nuclear weapons for more than 30 years, said the U.S. justifies its own tests while it views the tests of North Korea as threatening and destabilizing. Joining us now to discuss this further from Beijing is Einar Tangen. He's an author and columnist. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, sir. Now, before I talk about what a potential North Korean response would be to this test by the U.S., I'd like to pick up on that quote by the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, where it slammed the U.S. for a double standard.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the kind of thing that is leading down the path towards war. You cannot do this kind of playground bully type of thing and expect this to be passed off as diplomacy.
Well, speaking of that, we've seen North Korea in the past to not stepping back when threatened. In fact, stepping up its own military exercises and tests. Now, isn't that what we're going to see then in the next few days and weeks?
Yes, this is waving a red flag at young Kim. He feels very strongly that he needs to respond and keep a very, very aggressive posture towards all people around him. The fact that he feels pressure from Beijing, that he has South Korea, Japan, the rest of the world kind of looking on, and the U.S. Throwing these types of things around. It is not the way to get people to the bargaining table. I mean, it is surprising that yesterday Mattis and the rest, and Tillerson, were talking about trying to find a path to negotiation, and then today they fire off a missile. It seems that the intention is not clear, nor is it very sincere.
So would you, though, as an analyst, put any weight to indications of trying to revive some sort of negotiations in a diplomatic channel with North Korea?
I'm afraid that given the personality of Donald Trump, it's very hard to see how that would happen. He seems to veer from one side to the next in a matter of moments. His flip-flops are legendary. This is not the kind of person that you say to yourself, I want to sit down and negotiate with them. Any sign of weakness will be interpreted as a sign by Trump and his people that they can, in fact, bully the situation. But this is not an endorsement of North Korea, of their nuclear program, or the recent provocation. But if this is going to be resolved without loss of life and further tension, and in particular a nuclear disaster, there must be a way to find a peaceful solution, or at least give it a chance.
Some prudent words there. Let's leave it there for now. That's author.